should have barred that door. I knew opening it would cost me everything, maybe even the last piece of my soul. But when the blizzard screamed against the roof of Silas Crow's lonely ranch, the cry of a child rose louder. Snow burned through the cracks like judgment itself as a mother and her 3 girls staggered into his light, half frozen, half starved, and hunted by a man with clean paper and dirty intentions. Their youngest carried the same blue eyes as the son Silas buried 6 winters ago, and that resemblance struck him like a bullet he'd forgotten to dodge. He should have sent them away. He didn't. By dawn, the storm had sealed them inside the house he once treated as a tomb. By noon, whispers in town accused the mother of madness and theft. By sundown, a man in a polished coat rode up with a forged guardianship order and a smile that dripped poison. Silas stood in the doorway, arms braced against the cold, knowing one truth God himself might have written. The moment those girls crossed his threshold, they became his to protect. Law or no law, past or no past. What Silas didn't know, not yet, was that one of the girls carried a secret of her own. A secret that would break the case wide open before the week ended. And that the man riding toward them had already decided someone in that house would not survive Thanksgiving. Before we begin, if you're watching from anywhere in the world, drop your city in the comments below. I want to see how far this story travels. And make sure you subscribe, keep that bell on, and stay with us until the end. You won't regret it. Snow slammed against the ranch door so hard the hinges cried out, and Silas Crow knew, before he even rose from the table, that someone out there was losing a battle the night wouldn't let them win. The wind wasn't just howling, it was begging, dragging something small and frightened across the drifts straight to his porch. Then came 3 knocks, sharp enough to split bone. Not a neighbor, not a traveler. Desperation had a sound, and he'd lived with it long enough to recognize its steps. He stood. The chair legs scraped across the floor, like they, too, didn't want him walking toward that door. His hand brushed the cold metal of the latch, and a thought cut through him so fast it stung. I can't do this again. But the storm shoved another fist of snow under the door, and through the roar he heard it. A thin, trembling whimper. A child. Silas's breath caught. His heartbeat misstepped. The same sound had lived in his house once, soft and warm, before God took it back. He opened the door anyway. Wind exploded inward. Snow twisted into the entryway, and in the middle of it stood a woman half buried in white, clutching 3 children like the last pieces of her soul. Her shawl was ice, her lips near blue, and the smallest girl sagged in her arms as if sleep and death were trying to claim her at the same time. Sir, please, just until morning, the woman gasped. The littlest child lifted her face, blue eyes, pale, frostbitten, pleading, his son's eyes, the exact color. Silas gripped the doorframe to steady himself. A memory rose, unwanted, unbidden. I held him once. Warm, breathing. His jaw clenched. His knuckles whitened. The older girl stepped forward, planting her thin body between her mother and the storm like a tiny soldier. We can work, sir. Mama can sew. I can carry water. We ain't asking for charity. Lightning didn't flash, but something inside Silas struck just as bright. Snow was already collecting in the child's eyelashes. They wouldn't last 10 minutes out there. maybe less. Inside, he said. The woman hesitated only a heartbeat before pushing the children across the threshold. Warmth wrapped them. The girl's boots slushed against his clean floor. The smallest one whispered, voice barely a thread, "Don't let him take us again. Please." Silas felt something inside him split. Clean through, old scar torn open. Not here. Not tonight. Not in the house the Lord had left empty for 6 winters. He stepped aside, bolting the door behind them as if sealing a covenant he hadn't meant to make. Outside, the storm roared. Inside, something else began. And Silas Crow, a man who had buried everything he ever loved, knew God had just placed 3 small, impossible reasons on his floor, and asked him to choose. The storm slammed against the bolted door, but inside the air held still, like even the house was holding its breath. Silas moved first. He hung his coat on the peg, the same peg his wife had used, then realized what he'd done and pulled his hand away, fet, as if burned. The woman didn't notice. She was too busy steadying the smallest child, rubbing her arms with palms stiff from cold. "Set him by the stove," Silas said. "Get the wet off before it freezes harder." The older girl guided her sisters toward the warmth with a kind of practiced grace. Too careful, too adult. She didn't look at anything she didn't need to. No curiosity, no wandering eyes. Children should stare at everything. This one stared only at the floorboards, mapping exits. Silas recognized that look. He'd worn it himself once. May, he didn't know her name yet, but the storm had already carved her shape into his mind, kept shifting her weight from foot to foot, as if waiting for permission to breathe. Is there water I can use, sir?" she asked softly. "To wash their faces. I don't want to dirty your home." "It's a house," Silas said. "It'll survive." She blinked at the reply, unsure whether it was kindness or warning. Truth was, he wasn't sure either. He fetched a bucket of warm water and set it beside the stove. The smallest girl reached for it immediately, fingers trembling so badly she sloshed half onto the floor. "Slow," he said, crouching beside her, taking the rag gently from her hand. "Like this." She watched him wring it out, her eyes, those same impossible blue eyes, tracking every movement. When he lifted the cloth toward her cheek, he hesitated. "I can't do this. I shouldn't." But the child leaned in before he could pull away. Her skin was cold enough to sting. He wiped the melted frost from her lashes, careful as if she might crack like ice. "Name?" he asked quietly. She didn't answer. The older girl did. "Lark," she said. "I'm Ada. That's my mama." May bowed her head slightly, acknowledging the introduction. "We're grateful, Mr. Crow," he said. The way she repeated it, Mr. Crow, had the same distance the townsfolk used. A name said from behind a fence. Ada straightened her spine. "Mr. Crow, we can sleep by the stove. We don't want more than what keeps the little ones alive." Alive. Not warm. Not safe. Alive. He stood so abruptly, the iron stove rattled. "You'll stay in the front room tonight. It's warmest. I'll bring blankets." He didn't wait for thanks. He walked down the hallway with long, hard strides, but each step echoed louder than he liked. The house wasn't used to voices, or footsteps, or life. When he opened the linen chest, the smell of cedar rose up, clean, sharp, untouched for years. He grabbed 3 blankets, hesitated, then took a fourth. Back in the stove room, May was kneeling on the floor, rubbing Lark's feet to bring color back. Ada hovered behind her like a little sentinel, jaw clenched, ready to absorb whatever blow life threw next. Silas set the blankets down. "They'll need dry clothes." "We don't have extra," May admitted. "I meant to, well, things turned wrong before we could pack proper." He nodded once, went to the stairway, and stopped halfway up. On the landing there was a door he hadn't opened since the day he nailed it shut. Something in him moved. Just a hair. Just enough. He pulled the door open. Inside, the room lay untouched. A narrow bed, a shelf of little wooden animals, a pair of boots too small for any living person now. He picked up the quilt, folded at the foot of the bed. His wife's stitching ran in crooked little trails along the edges. She'd never been good at sewing, but she'd tried her best for their boy. "Forgive me," he whispered. He didn't know if he meant the boy, or the woman who'd sewn the quilt, or the Lord who'd taken them both. Silas carried the quilt downstairs. May looked up as he laid it gently around Lark's shoulders, the colors bright even in the dim lamplight. "Oh, sir, we can't. This looks dear to you." "It's a blanket," he said, voice rough. "Blankets are for using." Lark burrowed into it instantly. The fabric swallowed her small frame. For the first time, she closed her eyes without shivering. May's throat worked, fighting something she didn't want to let show. "Mr. Crow, we'll repay every kindness. You have my word." "Not asking for it," he muttered. "But you have it anyway." Ada watched him with a gaze too sharp for her age, testing him, judging him, measuring his house, his voice, his hands. Children didn't do that unless life had taught them they must. Silas picked up the bucket and set it aside. "When the storm breaks, you'll tell me where you were headed." May nodded. "Where we meant to be isn't where we're wanted anymore." "Someone after you?" She didn't answer. She didn't have to. Outside, the wind screamed along the eaves as if trying to rip the roof away. The lamp flickered. The stove hissed. Silas looked at the 3 girls, their thin arms, their wet boots, their quiet terror, and felt something shift inside him like earth giving way. He didn't know why the Lord had steered them to his door. He only knew this: the night wasn't done testing him, and neither were they. "I won't fail again." The storm didn't let up. If anything, it grew teeth. Snow battered the windows hard enough to shake frost from the panes, and the wind crawled under the eaves with the low moan of something dying. Silas checked the latch twice before stepping back from the door. He didn't trust storms, or fate, or himself. Not tonight. May stood near the stove, wringing out Lark's damp stockings. Her hands were red, cracked at the knuckles, trembling with cold or fear. He couldn't tell which. Ada hovered at her shoulder, always watching, always ready. "They can't go back out there," Silas said. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The words held their own weight. May lifted her chin. "We don't aim to trouble you longer than we must, Mr. Crow. Just till morning." "Morning won't change that storm," he answered. "Or the cold." She hesitated. Pride was a hard thing to swallow, even when swallowing meant staying alive. The fire silhouetted her face, and he saw the moment she gave in. Not fully, not comfortably, but enough to choose survival over stubbornness. "If we're to stay even one night," she said quietly. We'll work for it. I won't have my girls think we live on charity. Silas studied her. The thin shoulders, the threadbare shawl, the iron underneath both. You'll work tomorrow, he said. Tonight you sleep. Ada bristled, as if she expected a trap in simple kindness. She stepped slightly in front of her mother again, a tiny shield made of bone and stubborn will. Silas frowned. No one's hurting you here. Ada didn't blink. You don't know us yet, sir. He didn't know what that meant, but the truth in her voice pulled something tight inside him. He motioned toward the staircase. Come on. You need a room. The house creaked as they followed him. Old wood, old grief, old memories stirred awake by footsteps that didn't belong to ghosts. He kept the lamp low, partly to save oil, partly because the shadows hid what he didn't want explained. At the top of the stairs, he paused. The hallway branched into 3 doors. 2 were shut tight. One stood slightly ajar, the room he'd readied without meaning to, long before they arrived. Use this one, he said. May stepped in first. The bed was simple, clean. The quilt patched but warm. She touched the folded edge, then pulled her hand away as if it wasn't meant for her. Mr. Crow, this is too fine, she whispered. It's a bed, he said. Beds are for sleeping. Lark crawled up instantly, burrowing into the quilt like some small animal, finding a burrow for the first time. Ada sat rigid at the corner of the mattress, still ready to flee the moment anything turned wrong. May hovered by the door, watching the wind claw at the frosted window, watching him. Sir, she said, if the storm lifts by dawn, we'll be gone. It won't, Silas said. And even if it does, you're not walking, out in the cold, before those girls can stand steady. May swallowed. I don't want to be a burden. You ain't. The words slipped out before he could stop them. Too soft. Too revealing. He turned away to hide the way his breath shook. I said the same thing once. I failed anyway. Blankets are in the chest, he said roughly. Use what you need. Ada shifted, studying him with those sharp, measuring eyes. Why are you helping us? The question hit harder than it should have. Silas gripped the railing until the wood dug into his palm. Because someone ought to, he said. Lark's small voice floated from the bed. Because God sent us? Silas froze. The storm outside seemed to still for one brief second. He didn't turn, didn't trust his face to answer for him. Get some rest, he managed. I'll check the fire. He walked down the hallway, each step heavier than the last. At the bottom of the stairs, he paused, listening. May whispering a prayer over her girls. Ada laying out boots by the hearth, careful and exact. Lark humming to her ragged doll in the softest little tune. Something about angels watching. The kind of sounds a house wasn't supposed to hold anymore. Silas pressed a hand to the doorframe, steadying himself against the swell of something he didn't want to name. The storm raged on. Inside, warmth spread in stubborn lines across the floor. And Silas Crow, a man who had sworn never to open his door or his heart again, realized he had just broken both vows in the same breath. Lord help me, I can't do this twice. Morning didn't come gently. It pressed its gray light through the frost on the window panes, dim and reluctant, as if the sun itself wasn't sure it wanted to witness whatever today would bring. Silas stepped into the kitchen expecting silence, the kind he'd lived with so long it felt like furniture. But there was sound. Soft, careful sound. A spoon tapping the rim of a pot. Small feet padding across the floor. A thin, breathy giggle quickly smothered, like a child afraid joy might get her punished. He stopped in the doorway. May stood at the stove, sleeves rolled, stirring a pot of thin porridge with the slow, practiced motion of someone who'd stretched meals farther than anyone should have to. Her hair was still damp at the ends, her shoulders hunched not from cold, but from responsibility. "Morning, Mr. Crow," she said without turning. Not timid, not bold, just tired, with a thread of hope she seemed ashamed of. Ada sat at the table, plucking crumbs from a salvaged crust, like she was performing a duty rather than eating. Lark was curled under the quilt on the bench, humming to her battered doll. The house wasn't quiet. Silas's throat tightened. He blamed the cold. "You didn't have to cook," he said. May stirred once more. "If someone gives us shelter, we repay it. My mama raised me that way." "Still," he muttered, though he wasn't sure what argument he meant to make. Lark peeked out from the quilt. Her eyes, too blue, too familiar, watched him with the soft weight of a child who already knew fear but hadn't forgotten trust. Silas looked away first. He reached up to the shelf above the hearth to fetch tin plates. His fingers brushed something that shouldn't have been touched. A wooden horse. Small. Hand-carved. A toy he hadn't moved in 6 winters. Ada had it in her hands before he realized. She lifted it gently, like it might shatter. "Is this for playing?" Silas's breath snagged. His ribs tightened around it. "That ain't—" He stopped. He could have taken it. Could have snapped, put it back, the way a man protecting a wound would. Instead, he swallowed the stone lodged in his throat. "It's a toy," he said. "Toys are meant to be used." Ada glanced at him, uncertain, waiting for the catch. When none came, she nodded and passed the horse to Lark. The little girl clutched it in both hands, eyes going wide and soft. May saw all of it, saw Silas's hesitation, saw the trembling in his jaw he couldn't hide fast enough. "You had a child," she said quietly. Not a question. Silas didn't answer. His silence was a confession carved deep. He set the plates down harder than he meant to. The clang startled Lark. Her small shoulders jumped. "Sorry," he said, and meant it. May ladled porridge into bowls. It wasn't much, but she served her girls first. Then Ada handed the last bowl to Silas with both hands, like an offering she wasn't sure he'd accept. "I didn't make enough for a man your size," May said, "but I'll fix a larger pot by midday." "It's fine," he said. "Food's food." It was the kind of reply he gave to keep distance. But distance was already slipping. "You can sit, Mr. Crow," Ada murmured. He almost told her he preferred standing. He almost said he didn't sit at tables anymore, not ones with empty chairs on either side. Instead, he lowered himself onto the bench across from them. Lark warmed her hands around her bowl, blowing on the steam. Ada ate slowly, methodically, counting bites in her head. May watched them with the sharp-eyed vigilance of a mother who'd lost too much already. Silas didn't eat at first. He watched them breathe life into a room that had forgotten the sound. Something loosened, just a thread, in the iron knot behind his ribs. When they finished, May rose to wash the bowls, but Ada was faster, snatching them up and carrying them to the basin. "That's my job," May said. "You cooked," Ada replied. "Let me do this." The exchange was quiet, practiced, sad. Silas stepped back, letting them move around his kitchen as if it had always belonged to them. Water splashed softly. Lark traced lines in the frost on the window with one small finger. May wrung out a rag, her breath fogging the glass. Then Ada froze. She had spotted the hop kimchi on the high shelf, tin, dented, painted with faded flowers. May's eyes widened as Ada reached for it. "No, sweetheart. Don't touch." Too late. The girl had already lifted it down and held it out. "We're sorry," Ada said. "I didn't mean... It was just... pretty." Silas stared at the box. Memory punched the air from his lungs. His wife's box. Her thread. Her needles. The last thing she touched the night the fever took her boy. His fingers curled. He should take it. Should tuck it back where no one could bruise a memory he'd tried to bury. But May's face, open, apologetic, stopped him, and Ada's hands shook just slightly, as if she expected him to shout. Silas reached out. "Keep it," he said. Ada blinked. May sucked in a breath. "You can use it," he added, voice almost steady. "Fix whatever needs fixing." Lark tugged gently at the hem of Ada's dress. "Mama can sew my sleeve?" May swallowed hard. "Yes, baby. We can fix that." Ada opened the tin. Spools rattled, needles glinted. A bit of blue thread unrolled across her palm like a quiet blessing. Silas looked away, down at the stove, at the floor, at anything but that box in their hands. He didn't see the way May watched him with something like understanding, or the way Ada's shoulders eased for the first time, or the way Lark hugged the wooden horse to her chest as if she'd always known it was meant for her. But he felt it. The house, his tomb, his cage, had just taken its first breath in 6 winters. And Silas Crow, against every vow he'd made, felt something warm press against the cold place inside him. "Lord, what are you doing to me?" Snow hammered the roof as the wind shifted east, pushing drifts across the yard until every track from last night disappeared. Silas stepped into his boots, shoulders bracing for another day of weather that didn't care who lived or died. May was already at the door, scarf tied, jaw set. "You shouldn't go out in that," he said. She tightened the knot anyway. "You said there were animals to feed. We pay our way." Her voice was steadier today, fear still there, but wrapped in resolve. He didn't argue. Something about the way she stood told him she'd spent too many winters being pushed aside. "Take this," he said, reaching for the coat on the hook by the stove. She froze. It wasn't just a coat. The threadbare wool was small at the shoulders, soft from years of wear, the cuffs frayed in familiar places. May touched it as if she were afraid it'd shatter. "This is a woman's coat," she whispered. "It's warm," he answered. "Wear it." Her eyes lifted to his face. She didn't ask the question hanging there. We both know who it belonged to. But she slid her arms into the sleeves with quiet care, like she knew she was touching a ghost. Silas swallowed. "Lord, give me strength. They crossed the yard, the barn looming like a half-remembered promise in the storm. Snow slapped their cheeks, stung their eyes. Lark waved from the window, the wooden horse pressed to the glass beside her. Ada pulled the curtain closed after a moment, protective as ever. Inside the barn, the cold had teeth. May moved first, gathering feed, checking hooves, moving with the sure, economical motions of someone who'd learned to work before she'd learned to rest. Silas watched her from the corner of his eye, surprised. "You've done this before." "A few seasons," she said. "Pa had a small plot. We kept what we could alive." Her breath puffed into the air, white, steady. She knelt beside the larger mare, fingers brushing a swollen tendon. "She's been favoring this leg," May murmured. Silas knelt beside her. Their shoulders nearly touched. He felt the warmth of her through the borrowed coat and stood too quickly. "Yeah," he said, clearing his throat. "Storm spooked her yesterday." May looked up. Her eyes were softer than before, but sharper too, like she could see through him if she chose. "You don't let anyone in this barn, do you?" "It's a barn," he said stiffly. "It's a vault," she corrected. "Everything important is locked in here." The words hit harder than they should have. He busied himself checking the hay racks, though everything was already in its place. May wiped her hands on her skirt. "You had a family. This place looks like someone left in the middle of loving you." He froze. "I'm not asking for details," she added quietly. "Just truth." Silas straightened, his shadow long against the barn wall. "They're gone," he said. "Both of them." "Lord keep them," she whispered automatically, as one mother to another. Then, "And you, Lord keep you too." He didn't reply. Couldn't. Instead, he handed her a bucket. Too quickly, too gruffly, and it sloshed against her skirt. She steadied it with both hands, and Silas cursed under his breath, reaching to take it back. But she shook her head. "I'm fine." Her voice, softer now, like she understood what he hadn't said. They worked in silence, though it wasn't the old, dead silence of the house. This one felt lighter. Working silence, breathing silence. When they finished, May leaned against a stall post, catching her breath. "You know," she said, "you treat that house like a grave." He whipped around. "You don't know anything about that house." "No," she replied, "but I know what it looks like when someone punishes themselves. I've done it." Her hands, red from cold, tightened around the coat he'd given her. "The rooms you keep shut. You're not protecting memories. You're burying them alive." Silas felt something flare under his ribs. Anger, pain, he couldn't tell. "You don't understand," he said. "Then help me," she replied simply. "Help me understand why a man who saved my girls can't save himself." He turned away. His jaw worked, but no words formed. "I'm not ready," a voice inside him whispered. "Not yet." A gust of wind rattled the barn doors, and snow dust sifted through the seams like falling ash. May pulled the coat tighter and stepped back. "We'll be inside if you need anything, Mr. Crow." It wasn't disrespect. It wasn't distance. It was an invitation wrapped in space. Silas watched her walk toward the house, snow rising around her ankles, her daughter's shadows moving behind the window as she approached. He didn't follow. Not yet. But he stayed in the barn longer than needed, one hand resting on the stall gate, the other curled in a fist he couldn't unclench. Something in him was shifting, cracking, letting in a bit of light he hadn't asked for. And the worst part, or the mercy, was this. I knew it the moment she put on that coat. The storm eased by afternoon, sunlight breaking through in thin, exhausted strips. In the house, warmth clung to the walls in a way Silas hadn't felt in years. Too alive, too loud, too dangerous. May had the girls sorting blankets in the living room. Lark babbled to her wooden horse. Ada hummed a tune Silas didn't recognize but found himself listening to anyway. And Clara, the eldest, moved like someone twice her age. Fast, efficient, silent. She carried a bundle of worn clothes to the table, searching for a needle. The box May had found upstairs sat open, threads spilling out like veins. Clara lifted an old skirt, intending to mend a tear. Then something thin and yellowed slipped from the lining. A folded letter. She froze. Her eyes narrowed as she unfolded it, lips moving silently while she read. A shadow passed across her face. Heavy, adult, the kind a child should never have to wear. May noticed, too late. "Clara?" she asked gently. "What's that, darling?" Clara kept reading, knuckles whitening around the page. Lines written in a sharp, masculine hand. "These children are burdens. She can't care for them. Court will listen to me, not her. We can take the girls legally." The words carved into her like a blade. When Clara looked up, she wasn't 11. She was a soldier. "He wrote this," she whispered. "He said we're the reason everything goes wrong. He said he'd take us." May reached for her. Clara stepped back. "No, Mama. We can't stay here. He'll find us again." Her next breath shook hard enough to rattle the table. "We have to leave before he comes." Ada whimpered. Lark stopped talking to her wooden horse and stared. May tried to steady her voice. "Sweetheart, we're safe for now." "We're never safe," Clara snapped, and the crack in her voice broke something inside May. "If we stay, he'll use the law. If we go, at least we choose where." She crumpled the letter in her fist and hurried toward the bedroom, grabbing blankets, stuffing small rolls of bread into a sack, with a precision that terrified May. Silas stepped in from the mudroom just in time to see her tuck a paring knife into her pocket. "Stop," he said quietly. Clara jerked, startled. The knife clattered to the floor. Silas didn't raise his voice. He simply stepped forward, picked the knife up, and set it on the counter out of reach. "You planning to fight a grown man with this?" he asked. Her chin trembled, but she didn't look away. "I'm planning to keep my sisters alive." Ada began to cry. Lark crawled into May's lap, burying her face in the borrowed coat. May closed her eyes. "Lord, help me. I can't lose them." Silas crouched so he was eye level with Clara, not towering over her, not commanding her, just there. "You listen to me," he said, voice low. "Running into the cold with two little ones is suicide. The storm hasn't finished with these hills." "We can't stay," she insisted, though the steel in her voice was melting. "He'll take us. The court will believe him." Silas exhaled through his nose, steady but weighted. Not if I stand between him and that door. Clara's breath hitched, one small, sharp sound that cut deeper than any scream. But why? She whispered. We're not your family. A beat, a breath, a truth he didn't mean to say. I've already lost one family. I'm not losing another. He didn't speak it aloud. He didn't have to. Something in his posture, his jaw, his shoulders, the way he blocked the door without thinking, told her everything. His next words were firm, almost gentle. You're a child, Clara. Let me be the one who worries about men like him. Her knees buckled just enough that May caught her by the shoulders. The girl pressed her face into her mother's chest, breath shaky and thin. Silas stood, jaw working. Give me the letter, he said. Clara hesitated, then opened her hand. The paper lay wrinkled, damp at the edges from her sweat. Silas didn't unfold it. He didn't need to. Truth had a weight all its own. From now on, he said, nobody leaves this house alone. Nobody runs. Nobody fights shadows by themselves. May stared at him, searching his eyes. Mr. Crow, you can't protect us from everything. No, he said. But I can make sure you don't face it cold and hungry. He walked to the door, hand braced on the frame as if steadying the whole house. Snow swirled outside, soft but relentless. Clara wiped her nose with her sleeve. If he comes, she whispered, he'll bring papers, real ones. Silas nodded once. Then I'll bring truth, and God willing that'll be enough. May swallowed. The fire crackled. The wind pressed against the windows like a warning. No one spoke for a long moment. Inside that silence, something shifted. Not peace, not safety, but a beginning. A promise made without ceremony. A battlefield chosen. And from somewhere deep inside him, Silas felt the old world of his grief shudder, as if the house itself braced for the next blow. The storm had quieted by morning, leaving the world buried under a white so clean it almost looked merciful. It wasn't. Snow was never mercy in these hills. It was a pause before trouble arrived. Silas was splitting wood behind the barn when he heard hooves crunch through the drifts. Only one man rode that steady in winter. Sheriff Rourke pulled up, dismounted stiffly, and lowered his scarf. His beard was rimed with frost, eyes tight with the kind of news no lawman wanted to carry. Morning, Silas. Silas leaned on the axe handle. Don't lie to me, Tom. Morning's got teeth. Tom exhaled, steam rising. Someone hit town last night asking questions. About May. About the girls. Silas's grip tightened until the wood creaked. Name? He asked. Didn't give one, but he carried papers. Tom reached into his coat and offered a folded notice. Says he's got temporary guardianship signed by a judge downstate. Silas didn't touch it. Tom continued, voice dropping. And he's telling folks she stole the children. Says she's unstable. Says she's dangerous when cornered. Inside the house, through the glass, Silas saw Lark stack wooden blocks on the table. Ada wiped crumbs from her sister's face. Clara sat beside May, stitching quietly, shoulder pressed against her mother's, as though she feared the world might split them apart. He's building a story, Silas muttered. One that looks clean in daylight. Tom nodded. Town's already whispering. Couple women at the mercantile said May looked too proud for a wanderer. Folks always believe the story that comes with paper. Silas looked away, jaw clenched so tight he felt his teeth grind. I should have seen this coming. Tom cleared his throat. Silas, he's in a hurry. Says he'll be back by sundown to retrieve the girls. Asked me to accompany him. And you said? Silas asked. I said we ain't retrieving children we haven't even checked on. Tom holstered his gloves. But you know how it goes. Law looks different when the man waving papers wears nice boots. Silas lifted the axe, drove it clean through the log with one strike. The halves fell apart like something already broken. You're telling me to expect a fight, he said. I'm telling you, the fight's already walking up your road. Tom stepped closer. Silas, don't do anything stupid. That man threatens those girls. He won't have to worry about stupid. He'll have to worry about me. Tom winced. This ain't 6 years ago. You ain't a lawman now. Folks forget your badge. They don't forget your temper. Silas's breath fogged the air, slow and heavy. I'm not raising a hand unless I have to, he said. But I'm not handing over children to a man who calls them burdens on paper. Tom nodded, though worry still pinched his brow. Talk to May. Prepare her. And Silas, prepare yourself too. He mounted up and rode off, leaving only hoof prints that the wind erased within minutes. Silas stood alone in the yard, snow clinging to his coat, cold settling into his bones like a truth he didn't want. When he entered the house, May looked up immediately. She always sensed weather, both kinds. Trouble? She asked. He removed his gloves slowly, as if each word needed space. Your kin reached town. Clara stiffened. Ada slid closer to May. Lark pressed her wooden horse to her chest. May didn't gasp, didn't shake. She only closed her eyes, a tremor running through her hands before she steadied them on the edge of the table. What did he say this time? She asked. Silas answered plainly. That he's your girl's guardian, that he's here to take them. Lark whimpered. Ada held her tighter. Silas moved around the table, steady and sure, not touching them but placing his presence like a shield. No one's taking anybody, he said, but he's coming back, and he means to look righteous doing it. May's voice thinned. Paper makes a liar look honest. Not to me, Silas replied. Clara rose from her chair. She wasn't trembling this time. She was burning through her fear. We should leave, before he comes, before the sheriff believes him, before the town chooses sides. Silas shook his head. If you run, he wins. Folks will say you fled because you're guilty. I'm tired of being guilty to everyone, May whispered. He heard the prayer under her breath. Too soft for the girls, loud enough for God. Silas took a step toward her. You stay. You eat. You rest. I'll stand in the doorway when he arrives. May swallowed. Her eyes glistened but didn't fall. Why? Why stand with us? He didn't hesitate. Because a house that's been quiet too long needs a reason to speak again, he said softly. And because I won't watch another child get taken by a man who thinks he owns the world. For a moment, the whole room held its breath. The stove, the walls, the storm-laden sky. Then Lark crossed the floor and gripped Silas's pant leg with one small, cold hand. He froze. Don't let them take us, a voice inside him whispered. Whether hers or his, he couldn't say. May inhaled, steadying herself. Sundown, she murmured. That's when he'll come. Silas nodded. Then we'll be ready. But even as he said it, snow began to fall again. Quiet, persistent, relentless. The kind of snow that erased tracks, blurred truth, and made every man's word feel small against the storm. The road into town looked harmless under the new snow. Smooth, shining, almost gentle. Silas knew better. Trouble traveled roads like this, quiet and dressed in Sunday clothes. He saddled the bay mare at first light, intending to buy flour and lamp oil, maybe ask a question or two before whispers grew legs. May insisted on coming, but he shook his head. Let me go alone, he said. Snow's thin. Tongues aren't. She didn't argue, though the look in her eyes said she knew exactly what awaited him and what it would do to her name. Town was half awake when he rode in. Smoke curled from chimneys. A few shopkeepers swept their steps. It should have felt ordinary. It didn't. People paused mid-sweep, mid-step, mid-sentence as he passed. Not hostile, not kind, just judging something they hadn't seen yet. And then he saw it. A single sheet tacked to the notice board outside the mercantile, edges fluttering in the breeze like a warning flag. He dismounted slowly. The words were written in neat, unforgiving ink. A woman unfit to raise children. A wanderer with unstable temper. Possible abduction. Use caution. No name. No signature. Just poison meant to be traced back to May by anyone hungry for gossip. Silas felt heat slice through him. Sharp. Cold. Controlled. Not anger. Something older. Deeper. He ripped the paper down. Mrs. Wyndham from the tailor's shop gasped softly. Mr. Crow, it was posted by a gentleman yesterday. Said it was for the welfare of the little ones. Silas turned. His voice came out low, even. A gentleman? She swallowed. Fine coat. Polished boots. Said he was concerned. Concerned. That word always sounded cleanest right before it dragged someone through the mud. Silas crushed the notice in his fist and shoved it inside his coat. I knew this man would go for the soul, not the throat. He bought what he came for, though he barely remembered paying. Every step back to the ranch felt longer than the last. When he reached the house, May stood on the porch waiting. One look at his face and she knew. What did he post? She whispered. Silas didn't hand her the paper. Instead, he spread it on the porch rail. She read once, twice. Then her knees buckled just enough for the railing to catch her. Lord, she breathed. He's trying to take everything. Ada peeked out from behind the doorframe. Clara stepped onto the porch, jaw clenched, eyes bright with a fury too old for a child. He's lying, Clara said. Everybody knows he's lying. No, May said softly. Everybody knows he has money and paper. Lark came toddling out, clutching her wooden horse. Mama, why you sad? May wiped her eyes with the heel of her hand. Nothing, baby, just wind. But her voice cracked, betraying her. Silas felt something twist in his chest, a pull he didn't want, but couldn't ignore. You want to run, he said. May didn't deny it. My girls are being dragged through the dirt. Every winter of my life I've fought to keep them warm and fed, and now he paints me like a wolf. I can't stay here and have your name dragged into this. Silas stepped closer, boots crunching in the snow. My name's been dragged through worse. That isn't fair, May whispered. No, he agreed. It's not. Silas looked at the girls, Ada holding Lark's hand tight, Clara trying to look strong for all three. Children shouldn't know the weight of corruption, shouldn't know the shape of fear on their mother's face. But they did. Silas braced his hands on the porch rail beside May's. Their shoulders didn't touch, but the cold between them warmed a fraction. You leaving makes him right, Silas said. You staying forces him into the light. May closed her eyes, breath trembling. I'm tired of fighting shadows. Then let me fight the man casting them. Just then Lark tugged Silas's coat. Her small fingers pressed against his knee, warm through the fabric. Don't let the bad man take us, she whispered. Silas froze. Her voice, soft, scared, hit a place in him he'd locked shut for 6 long years, because another child had once said words just like those, before he failed him. I wasn't enough then. I won't fail again. He knelt and touched Lark's cheek gently. I won't let anyone take you, he said. Not while I'm breathing. May covered her mouth with one hand. Clara looked away so she wouldn't cry. The wind shifted, cold biting at their ankles. Snowflakes drifted down, slow and deliberate. Silas straightened, lifting the crumpled notice. This goes in the fire, not your spirit. May nodded, barely, but the fear didn't leave her. It only changed shape, from panic into a quiet, aching dread. And somewhere behind them, in the quiet house that wasn't quiet anymore, something old stirred awake. A promise, a reckoning, a storm inside the storm, one that wouldn't blow over by sundown. By late afternoon, the sky dimmed early, the way winter skies do when something unwanted is traveling with the cold. The ranch seemed to shrink under the weight of it, walls breathing, floorboards listening. Clara stayed by the window, posture rigid, eyes narrowed at the road. Ada stacked firewood near the hearth. Lark whispered secrets to her wooden horse. And May kept smoothing the front of the borrowed coat, fingers trembling every time she reached the buttons. Silas checked the front door twice. Not for the lock, for himself. When the crunch of hooves finally broke the quiet, nobody spoke. The sound was steady, confident, practiced, like a man arriving to collect what he believed was already his. Silas stepped onto the porch before the rider even stopped. Vance Kellen sat tall in a polished saddle, coat immaculate, gloves butter-soft and clean despite the long ride. He smiled, the kind of smile men wear when they think the world belongs to them. "Mr. Crow?" he called, tipping his hat as if greeting an equal. "Fine evening." "Say what you came to say," Silas replied. Vance laughed lightly. "Straight to business. Good. Saves time." He reached into his coat and pulled out a crisp envelope. "Temporary guardianship," he said. "Signed, stamped, legal." Silas didn't take it. Didn't even glance at the seal. Behind him, he felt the girls watching through the curtain. Vance leaned forward in the saddle. "Now kindly bring the children out. Their mother may accompany them, or not. I don't mind either way." May stepped onto the porch, voice steady though her hands betrayed her. "They're not leaving with you." Vance put on a sympathetic frown. "May, dear, you know this is what's best. You can't care for them. I have resources, stability, influence." The judge agreed. "You bought him." Clara whispered from the doorway. Vance's eyes flicked to her, cold calculation behind the smile. Clara, sweetheart, you'll be safer with me. All of you will. Silas moved, just enough to block Clara from his view. Vance's smile thinned. Mr. Crow, it appears you're interfering in a family matter. You showed up with lies on paper, Silas said quietly. That's not family. That's theft. Big words, Vance replied, for a man harboring children who are not his. Silas stepped off the porch and closed the distance between them in 3 slow strides. Snow cracked under his boots. You want those girls, Silas said, because the land they stand on will be worth something someday. The law lets minors sign away rights their guardians hold. And you want that signature. Vance's jaw tightened, but only for a second. Then he smiled again. I see you've been informed, he said. No matter. Paper is paper, and I have mine. He offered the envelope again. Take a look. Silas didn't move. I'm not taking anything from you. Then I'll call the sheriff. Silas didn't blink. Call him. Vance hadn't expected that. His composure slipped. I have every legal right, he snapped. You have every dishonest intention, Silas shot back. Inside the house, Ada whimpered. Lark pressed her wooden horse to her cheek. May's breath hitched. Vance regained his smile, but it came back sharp. Mr. Crow, let's not escalate things. You're a man alone on a dying ranch. You can't risk a scandal. And you certainly can't protect a woman and 3 children from the full weight of the law. Silas's voice dropped to a low, dangerous calm. Watch me. For the first time, Vance's eyes registered something other than amusement. Caution. He straightened in the saddle, glancing at the house as if measuring the cost of pushing further. Be reasonable, Silas, he said. You don't know these people. They're nothing to you. May flinched, but Silas didn't look back. Nothing to me? Then why does the thought of losing them feel like losing the dead all over again? A thought so sharp it startled even him. He took a breath. You're not stepping foot in that house. Vance's smile vanished. This isn't finished, he hissed. No, Silas agreed. It isn't. Vance jerked the reins, forcing his horse to turn, snow spraying beneath its hooves. He rode off without another word, but the vow hung behind him like smoke. Silas watched him disappear down the road, breath steady, heart anything but. May approached slowly. He'll return, she whispered. With more men. With more lies. Yes, Silas said, and I'll be here. May looked at him, really looked, seeing the weight he carried and the decision he'd already made. Why do you care so much? She asked. Silas's hands curled at his sides. Because no one cared enough 6 years ago, he murmured. And I won't relive that mistake. A confession so soft the wind nearly stole it. May didn't answer. She didn't need to. Behind them the girls stood clustered together, small shadows framed in warm lamplight, while outside the world darkened. The storm hadn't begun. The storm had arrived. Night settled early, pressing its weight against the windows. The cold climbed through the boards, whispering that sundown always brings the kind of choices no one wants to make. May put the girls to bed one by one. Ada tucked tight, Clara pretending not to shake, Lark curled around her wooden horse. Silas listened from the hallway. Every whisper, every breath, every fear. He took it all like a man carrying sins that weren't his. When May stepped into the kitchen, the lamp threw her shadow long across the floor. She wrapped her arms around herself, though the stove was still warm. "He'll be back in the morning," she said, "if not sooner." Silas nodded once. May drew a careful breath. "Mr. Crow, if you want us gone by dawn, say so now. I won't drag your name down with mine." "You didn't drag anything," Silas answered. "But you're already standing between us and him," she pressed. "He'll drag you into court, into gossip, into danger you don't owe us." Silas took a step toward her. "What I owe is not the point." "Then what is?" He didn't answer at first. Instead, he reached for the stovetop kettle, moved it aside, set down the notice Vance had posted in town. The ink looked darker in lamplight, uglier. "That man is coming with paper," Silas said, "and the only thing that beats paper is more paper." May blinked. "What do you mean?" Silas braced both hands on the table. It steadied him, or trapped him. He wasn't sure. "I mean, there's a way to stop him from taking your girls." He swallowed. "But it will bind us tighter than either of us planned." May's breath caught. Just a tremor. "Say it." Silas looked up. Their eyes met. Hers afraid of hope, his afraid of speaking it. "If you agree," he said slowly, "I can become the girl's legal protector. Today, before he steps on this porch again." May stared. "You mean adoption?" "No," Silas said gently. "That takes time we don't have." Her gaze wavered. "Then what do you mean?" Silas held her eyes as though the truth would break them both. "A marriage license," he said. The room went so still the stove seemed to hesitate in its crackling. May took a half step back. Not out of rejection, out of disbelief. "No, no, Mr. Crow. You barely know me, you barely—" "This isn't romance," he cut in softly. "This is a wall, a lawful one." She shook her head. "That's too much to ask." "It's not a demand," he said. "It's a choice. Yours." She backed into the edge of the table, holding it to stay steady. "I can't ask a man to take on 3 children and a storm of trouble." "You didn't ask," he said. "I offered." May pressed a hand to her forehead. "This isn't right." "It's not wrong either," Silas replied. "Judge Hart will sign it. Sheriff Rourke will witness it. And once it's filed, no man riding in with fake guardianship will get within 20 feet of your girls." May closed her eyes. Tears didn't fall. They just gathered like frost, waiting for the next wind. "I don't want you shackled to my burdens," she whispered. Silas breathed once, the breath of a man remembering another winter. Another small face, another mistake he refused to repeat. "I should have fought harder back then." The confession burned through him, silent but scorching. "May," he said quietly, "I'm not offering because I pity you. I'm offering because this house stopped feeling dead the moment your girls walked into it, and because God doesn't hand us second chances twice." May covered her mouth, as if holding something fragile in. Just then, a soft voice drifted down the stairs. "Ma?" Clara stood halfway down, pale but listening. "I heard." Silas turned. May wiped her face quickly, trying to look strong. Clara descended the last steps. "Is it true?" A marriage license could stop him? Silas nodded. It would stop him cold. Clara's jaw worked. She looked from her mother to Silas. Her eyes, sharp, too old, searched for lies, for motives, for safety. May whispered, "Clara, honey, this is grown folk business." "No," Clara said softly. "It's our business. Everything he decides touches us." A silence stretched, heavy but clean. Finally, Clara looked up at Silas. "If we say yes, what do you get out of it?" Silas didn't soften it. "A house that isn't empty, a reason to keep the stove lit, and the chance to do right, when I didn't before." Clara inhaled sharply. May closed her eyes at the honesty. The lamp flickered as if the wind had leaned close to listen. Ada appeared next, rubbing her eyes. Lark toddled behind her, holding her horse upside down. "We vote?" Ada whispered. May almost laughed, almost cried. "You don't need to vote, baby." "It's fair," Clara said. "Mama, let us choose too." Silas stepped back, giving space that still felt like protection. Ada went first. I want to stay. It's warm here." Simple. True. Lark clung to Silas's pant leg. "Horse says stay," she whispered. "I want this house." Silas's throat tightened. Then Clara faced them both. "What if," she asked quietly, "you wake up one day and realize you don't want us here?" Silas met her fear head on. "Then that'll be my cross to carry, not yours." She studied him long enough that May's breath scraped thin. At last, Clara nodded, small, solemn. "Okay," she whispered. "If Mama agrees, I agree." May sank into a chair, both hands covering her heart. "Lord, help me. What kind of world forces choices like this?" Silas pulled out the one chair he hadn't touched in years and sat opposite her. "The same world," he said gently, "that gives us ways to fight back." Outside, the wind picked up, not loud, not violent, just a warning that time was short. The morning rose colorless, a thin gray light flattening the world. Snow still clung to the rails, to the barn roof, to the windowsills, winter holding its breath before it struck again. But inside the house something moved with purpose. Silas rose before the stove warmed. He'd barely slept. Men preparing for war rarely do. May stood at the table already, her hair braided tight, hands trembling only when they stilled. Clara helped her knot the borrowed coat at the waist. Ada held a comb. Lark dragged her wooden horse along the floor, humming a tune she didn't understand, but trusted anyway. Silas watched them for a moment that hurt more than he wanted to admit. "I never thought I'd see a home fill itself again." A fleeting ache, but sharp. He cleared his throat. "We need to leave by sunup," he said. May nodded. She didn't ask where. She already knew. The Reverend's small chapel at the edge of town. A place of vows, paper, witnesses, and judgment. "You sure Judge Hart will sign today?" May asked, fastening the last button. "He will," Silas said. "Tom Rourke's talking to him now." "And the town?" Silas didn't answer. The town was the problem. They reached the chapel just as the first bell rang, thin, brittle, echoing through the frost. Reverend Ezekiel Hart stepped outside, blinking at them as if he'd been summoned by something older than law. "Mr. Crow," he said softly, "you come with heavy news." Silas handed him the folded notice, the one Vance posted, the one Silas couldn't bring himself to burn. The Reverend's eyes tightened. "Cruel words," he murmured. "Crueler intentions." May lowered her head. Ada squeezed her hand. Lark pressed her wooden horse to her cheek. Clara stood straight, chin up, determined to look braver than she felt. Reverend Hart gathered them inside with a sweep of his arm. "The Lord allows refuge," he said, "even when men forget how." The chapel was small. 2 rows of benches, a modest altar, windows fogged by the morning cold. Their breath rose like ghosts in the air. Judge Hart arrived next, carrying a ledger thick with old vows and older grudges. Sheriff Rourke followed behind him, stamping snow off his boots, eyes scanning the doorway as if expecting trouble. "Silas," he said, pulling off his gloves, "Vance is stirring the pot in town. Says this marriage is a sham to block guardianship." "It is a wall," Silas said simply, "and I'm building it." Tom nodded but didn't smile. "Then let's start before he rides up here with half the town behind him." May swallowed. Her hands twitched as she smoothed the skirt of her dress. Too thin for a wedding day. Too worn for anything but survival. Reverend Hart motioned them to stand before the altar. Silas took his place beside May. Her eyes lifted to him, full of fear and something fiercer, resolve. The Reverend opened the scripture. "Marriage," he said, "is a covenant before God. A place where 2 lives join to protect, to uplift, and to bind themselves to truth. Sometimes love begins this covenant. Sometimes necessity calls it forth. But in all things, the Lord examines the heart." May squeezed her hands together. "I don't want to lie before God," she whispered. Silas answered without hesitation. "Then don't. We stand for the girls, and maybe for something more in time." May looked at him as if he'd spoken something she didn't dare name. The Reverend continued, voice steady, gentle, but loud enough for the walls to hear. "May Kellen, do you enter this union willingly, seeking shelter, seeking partnership, seeking a lawful shield for your daughters?" Her breath shuddered, but she lifted her chin. "I do." "Silas Crow," the Reverend said, "do you take this woman and these children under her care to protect and uphold by law and by conscience? Not out of pity, but duty and the grace the Lord provides?" Silas's pulse hammered like a second heartbeat. He didn't look at the Reverend. He looked at May. "I do," he said. He meant it more than he expected. The Reverend reached for the ledger. "Then, by authority given to me, I—" The chapel doors blew open. Wind slammed through, scattering dust, whipping the pages of scripture like wings. And standing framed in the doorway, boots clean, coat immaculate, smile sharp as polished steel, Vance Kellen. He didn't step in. He strolled in, as if the church belonged to him. "Well," he drawled, "isn't this touching?" May jerked back. Clara moved in front of her sisters, and Silas stepped between them all before breath could form into words. Sheriff Rourke strode forward. "Vance, you're interrupting a lawful proceeding." "A farce," Vance said, waving a hand. "A rushed marriage to block guardianship. Even you should see through that." Judge Hart adjusted his spectacles. "Mr. Kellen, you have no authority here." No authority, Vance laughed once sharply. I have a court order signed by Judge Pritchard, stating I am temporary guardian of these children, and I have witnesses ready to testify May is unfit. That order is counterfeit, Silas said evenly. Vance smirked. Prove it. May stepped forward, voice trembling but firm. You told people I stole my own children. I told people the truth, Vance replied. The truth they're safer with me. Clara's voice cut through the air like flint striking steel. You want the land, not us. For a second, Vance's veneer cracked. Just a second. Then his smile returned, colder. Children imagine things, he said. Adults handle business. Silas took one step forward, and every soul in that chapel felt it. Business? Silas asked quietly. You call tearing a family apart business? Vance opened his mouth, but May beat him to it. She pulled the letter from her pocket, the one Clara found in the skirt, lining, the ink still violent on the page. You wrote this, she said, holding it up for all to see. Calling my daughters burdens, planning to use them for signatures and deeds, planning to shame me before God and before every living soul. Gasps filled the chapel. Reverend Hart's face hardened. Judge Hart straightened. Sheriff Rourke stepped closer. Vance's jaw flexed. That letter is forged. May's voice broke, but it broke upward, into strength. It is your handwriting. I lived with you long enough to know every loop and flourish. She's lying, Vance snapped. But Ada whispered to Lark, Mama doesn't lie, loud enough for the room to hear. Silas lifted the letter from May's shaking hand and handed it to the judge. The judge's eyes thinned as he read. Mr. Kellen, he said, this is sufficient evidence of coercion, fraud, and unfit motives. Until a full hearing, any claim of guardianship is suspended. Vance's face contorted. You can't do that. I just did, the judge said. The Reverend closed the scripture gently, as though laying a burden to rest. Now, he said, if there are no further objections. But Vance wasn't listening anymore. His eyes had gone to Silas, not with cunning, with hatred. This isn't over, he hissed. You've made an enemy, Crow. Silas didn't flinch. I've buried worse. Vance backed toward the door, fury twisting his smile into something broken. He spat on the floorboards and rode off, snow spraying behind him like sparks. Silas exhaled. The girls clung to May. The Reverend lifted the ledger again. Shall we continue? He asked softly. May looked at Silas. Silas looked back, steady, unshaken, changed. Yes, May whispered. Please. The vow was finished. The papers were signed. Sheriff Rourke and Judge Hart witnessed each line, and as May placed her trembling signature beside Silas's strong one, the clock struck midday. The sound echoed through the chapel like a door closing on the past, and another opening into something fierce, uncertain, and painfully hopeful. Outside, the wind turned colder still. By the time they returned to the ranch, afternoon light had thinned to a pale gold, drifting across the snow like a blessing, tired, but still trying. The house looked different now, not bigger, not brighter, just lived in. As if the vows spoken inside that chapel had followed them home and settled into the walls. May moved quietly through the kitchen, gathering what little they had. Bread, a small roast Silas had saved for winter's worst. a jar of apples she'd thought the girls would never taste again. Clara set the table. Ada fetched water. Lark hummed while placing her wooden horse in the center, like it was a guest of honor. Silas chopped wood outside, each strike steady, measured. I've been alone too long, he thought, the truth sharp as the axe blade, long enough to forget the sound of hope. When he carried the logs in, the room glowed, not bright, just warm in the way a man misses without knowing he's missing it. They sat together for the first time as something that resembled a family. No speeches, no toasts. Just small acts of gratitude. Clara passed the bread to her mother without being asked. Ada placed her hand atop May's, anchoring her. Lark leaned against Silas's arm, trusting him without question. May bowed her head, whispering grace through tears she didn't hide this time. When the meal ended, May rose and walked to the mantel. She held two things in her hands, her late husband's ring, Silas's wife's ring, strung on the cord he had worn for 6 long years. I can't erase what came before, she said softly. Neither can you. Silas stepped closer, breath caught in his chest. May placed her husband's ring inside the little sewing box Clara had found, its hinges worn but willing to hold memory without breaking. Then she offered Silas the cord with his wife's ring. I won't wear it, she said, but it deserves a place in this house, not on your neck. Silas closed his hand around the ring, slow, reverent. For the first time since the grave closed, his shoulders lowered, not in defeat, but release. He set the ring beside the sewing box. Lark touched both gently, as if blessing them with small, warm fingers. Now they stay, she whispered. Outside, the wind shifted, quiet, waiting. Inside, the house breathed, alive again. But in the distance, faint as a shadow crawling over snow, a horse's hoofbeat echoed. Vance hadn't disappeared. Trouble never did. It only circled back when the light was warmest.